Let's get the skinny on tariffs. I'm Jenna, and this is Smarter News. The founders of the Wall Street Skinny, a leading resource on navigating all things Wall Street from concepts to careers, have a long history together, as you're going to hear. Jen Saarbach and Kristen Kelly found themselves at some of the world's leading banks with a front row seat to changing markets, a changing economy, and a changing political environment. Now they're channeling their insider insight to provide outside perspective on navigating this week's big headlines on tariffs and why they matter. Here's our conversation.
We go back to the year 1992. It was our second grade class at Weston Public Schools in Massachusetts. So it was fate that brought us together. But I think one of the cool things is I'm an only child. And I think as you get older, you come to realize I have two kids and they're always like, how is Aunt Kristen if you guys aren't related? I was like, listen, guys, there's the family that you're born with and the family that you choose. And Kristen is not only the family that I've chosen, but she is now also my chosen business partner. We were talking on the phone all day, every day anyways. We were like, why not just make a business out of this?
Yeah, wait, so Kristen, what was your impression of Jen in the second grade? Were you all in right away, or were you a little wary about this girl?
I actually forget second grade. We were friends forever, and I think that one of the things is like she ditched me. It's like a joke. We were so not cool in middle school, and then she ditched me to go to like a private high school. But what was really fun is we stayed friends through, again, going to different high schools, going to different colleges, and then I followed her. She got a job at Lehman, but she introduced me. I was like not even studying anything to do with finance. Like she was always my just like guru for anything. I'd be like, Jen, what book should I read? And so she introduced me to the whole Wall Street world.
No, it's so true to have those relationships where someone has seen you through multiple stages of life is so critical and so really special. And as you mentioned, Lehman Brothers, it's bringing me to Midtown Manhattan. And we'll get to present times in just a moment, but Midtown Manhattan, where the Lehman Brothers building was, I actually worked around the corner at News Corporation. And I remember the moment of that investment bank collapsing, Jen. I mean, that was a huge moment in the financial crisis. I was a young journalist at the time. You were a young investment banker. I mean, what was that experience like for you, and how did that impact what you are now doing?
That's such a great question. I mean, I've told this story kind of in much greater detail in the podcast, so I will spare you the very long story. But I think at the time, everyone was greenlit for this wonderful booming economy, and all you had to do was plug into a job in an investment bank, and then the doors of Wall Street and whatever career you wanted were going to be open for you. And there was this perception of almost a linear career path, right? That if you just got the right building blocks and you just went to the right school and just landed the right job right out of school, that everything was going to be hunky-dory. And the 2008 global financial crisis really turned that all on its head, right? What it really taught me was that nothing can be taken for granted. Nothing is written in stone. Careers are long and you need to be flexible. And also that starting your career or operating in a time of volatility can actually be a huge blessing, especially when you're working in financial markets. And so for me, it's helped me to then weather a lot of the storms that happen subsequently, whether it be with COVID or whether it be with kind of what's happening right now, which feels very scary for a lot of people looking at the price action in the markets, of a little bit of resilience, both financially and emotionally.
So Kristen, then you both go kind of navigate these different financial periods. How did you two end up starting Wall Street Skinny?
So, I mean, it's actually interesting. So I started at Morgan Stanley. So like also not the best place to be, like from a product perspective, but I ended up realizing I love teaching and I've always loved teaching. My mom was a teacher. And so I actually left and went and worked at a firm that does the training programs for new hire analysts. Like I worked at a number of different divisions with that Morgan Stanley. I was in the investment banking division, financial sponsors. But like I said, my passion has always been teaching and like understanding how the world works. Like I love to learn. And so I did essentially training for new hire analysts and associates who were starting their jobs on Wall Street all over the world. Like I go to Hong Kong or, London and do these like 2 to 3 week training programs. And it was amazing. But I ultimately left New York City a couple of years ago, and Jen and I had always been talking, and I knew I wanted to stay kind of in the education space. And it was interesting because it was right as Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And I was doing a class at Blackstone. This was right before I left the firm I was at. I was teaching a class at Blackstone, and someone came up, and the whole class was actually like, oh my gosh, is this the new financial crisis, right? Like, is this 2008 all over again? And Jen and I, like I said, have been talking. And I was like, Jen, first of all, I have no idea what the heck you actually did in sales and trading. Like, I don't know what that actually means. Like, what did you do day to day? But on top of that, I was like, we should start a podcast and you should tell the story of like what it was like at Lehman Brothers, and then kind of use that to also like back up and be like, well, what's an investment bank? And basically we decided to kind of create this educational company almost through that lens, because I do think there's something that's so, like, you learn so much when things go wrong.
So now you're perfectly positioned for more volatility. Now that's very good. So you've had these massive things happen that you've had to respond to in a variety of different ways. And that's why I really, actually one of our amazing community members were like, you have to check out these two friends, because they do such a good job when it comes to what's happening on Wall Street, explaining what's going on and what to watch for. And Jen, maybe we'll just start with a very general question, speaking about present day, which is, we have these new tariffs that were announced that just last week. We're seeing the effect of that announcement. Just generally speaking, what stands out most to you about how these tariffs are changing or potentially could change the economy that we all share?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's so different, and I hate the like this, but now it's different, right? This time is different. Why is it different? Do you remember during COVID, everyone was like, in these unprecedented times is how every email would start. But what is so different about this shock to the global economy is that this isn't from some exogenous risk factor. This isn't, okay, there was a structural deficiency in how we were thinking about collateralized debt obligations. Therefore, the entire house of cards on which our financial system is built is actually much more vulnerable. Or it's the 1970s and we've got oil shocks to the economy and we now need to address that via fiscal and monetary policy. This is a self-imposed setback that we are going through. And so the equity markets are telling us that it is going to take so much longer for US manufacturing, for US companies, for the entire system that we know in the US to adapt to a world where these tariffs stay in place for a long time, that we're just not ready for, right? That all of the equity market appreciation that we saw over the last, call it 18 months, where it was just, all you had to do was whisper AI and everything went up 20%, that, okay, that was probably overblown, but that it is nowhere near capable of withstanding this kind of shock. So that to me is the most interesting thing. The market is taking this very, very seriously and reacting as though these tariffs are going to be here and they're going to stay. And if anything, I think that that's potentially a misreading. I'm just not sure. Is this a negotiation strategy? Is this part of some grander plan, this 3D chess game that none of us can see? Is this maybe what effectively foreign policy is going to look like for the next, 3, 4, 10 years? I have no way of knowing, but the equity market is taking it very, very seriously.
And we're seeing that still today. And there's that question, Kristen, right, of when does the stock market decide that the bottom is there? Or whether or not there continues to be these headlines that can be really scary. I mean, obviously, it doesn't matter, even if you're not actively investing in the market, it still is nerve-wracking to see those red lines or red numbers on the screen. Based on your background, though, what do you think the news is missing? And I ask that from a position of being formerly in business news and realizing that sometimes the splashiest business headlines aren't really giving us the depth of the story that we need to really understand what's going on. What do you think is missing from the conversation?
Well, I think that one of the things is just a lot of people want to understand what is the motivation. And I think part of the problem is that like there's a number of competing, not theories, but it's like, what is the reason for this? Is it to bring manufacturing jobs back? Okay, well, if that's true, I mean, there is a problem with certain aspects because like some of the things we cannot manufacture, right? Okay, so is it that? Is it, we're trying to, reduce the deficit? Well, okay, when we did these tariffs back in when Trump was in the first time, we had to subsidize farmers massively for lost exports, so it's like, what is the ultimate goal? And so I think that is one of the things that has the equity market so spooked, because if they believe that Trump really does believe that this is good policy. I mean, he has talked about, tariffs forever and does believe that the US has been getting screwed. I mean, I think that is why the equity markets are nervous, is that, again, if it's a negotiation, that's one thing. If the strategic rationale is to get onshore critical, like chips that we can't make abroad. Like that's the whole thing. It's like, what is the actual motive? And I think that if the equity markets understood what the motive was, then it would be a little bit easier to be like, okay, I can breathe a little bit. I can relax. But I think because there's so much uncertainty, uncertainty in and of itself is like, fear is a huge driving motivator. So, I think that again, it kind of boils down to people trying to understand why.
Interesting. And that's a really important point, and something you learn very early on covering business news is just that markets don't want uncertainty. They want certainty, even if the certainty isn't what they like. It's better than just not really knowing, right?
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I think that it's like, because if you know, then you can make plans, right? If they know that these are how the tariffs are going to be, okay, then you can start you can start to build your manufacturing plans. But like, if you're Nike and you're doing all your manufacturing in Vietnam, and by the way, Vietnam doesn't have a high tariff on us, like even if you include the value added tax, that's only like 10%, 9%. So, if that's going to potentially drop, like you're not going to start making moves to move a manufacturing plant out of Vietnam. So like, that's the whole thing. It's like companies need certainty so that they can at least start planning, and nobody knows what to do. It's just like people are paralyzed.
It's a really good point, because that seems to be a trend with President Trump, is that he says something and then people wonder, is this the art of the deal? Or does he mean what he says? Or is it a little bit of both? And what does that mean and so it definitely keeps people guessing, and that could be part of his strategy. Jen, I've been dying to ask you about this part of the story, though, as as I'm listening to all these different people talk about what could potentially be that, did you say a 3D chessboard, which by the way, makes my head hurt. I'm like, that this is part of a broader plan to try to manage our debt in some way, or kind of figure out a way to bring more economic stability, because as different members of the administration have talked about, we're on a unsustainable course. We have too much debt, too much waste, too much fraud. We know this is the theme of this administration, and that part of these tariffs is going to be connected to that. Can you connect the dots on the theory there of how it could potentially work?
I think could potentially is a really great way of framing this. The way I think about it is, if I said I want to lose 10 pounds, so instead of maybe cutting back my alcohol intake, my plan is to throw myself off a cliff, hope that I break my jaw, get it wired shut, and not be able to eat for a month. And that way I think I'll lose the weight. So let's back up a sec.
Sounds dramatic, by the way.
That's the kind of drama that the markets are experiencing, and that's how they're reacting. So if you think about this, right, there is a very real situation here where a president has come into office, and our country is, if it were a company, bankrupt, right? We have massive spending that we simply don't have the tax receipts and the income to justify, right? So we've got a deficit of whatever it is, 1.8 trillion going up constantly, right? We have $36.2 trillion worth of debt. Now, the theory is that one could deliberately tank the markets, force the Fed to act by basically saying growth is slowing so much, who cares about the impact of these tariffs on inflation? So there's only so many things that the Federal Reserve can do. This is also not taking into account the decrease in tax revenues that we're going to get from, erasing $7 trillion or $8 trillion of value in the equity markets right now. I find so many holes in this theory that, sure, there could be some nominal savings, but look at what's happening in the markets right now. The equity markets are collapsing, risk off across the board. Rates aren't moving much. All we're doing is pricing in marginally higher increase in likelihood of a Fed cut at the next meeting.
So, Kristen, what President Trump has said going into this week is there has to be some medicine. There's like no pain, no gain sort of situation. Yes, this is what's happening in the immediate, but we're recalibrating on several levels. We're going to make the government more efficient. We're going to trim down our federal workers and unleash that workforce for the private industry. We're going to make America more attractive for people to come in and build here and to employ here. And we're going to be safer because of that. Yes, all of this could be happening with the equity markets or with treasuries, but at the end of the day, this is a national security problem for our families. And here's why we have to try to figure out how to, again, recalibrate. What do you think of that? And what do you think is the potential of recession? Because Jen just mentioned that, this could be leading to a recession. What are your thoughts on all of that?
And part of the thing is, Trump talks a lot about how the trade deficit is other people screwing us. And again, it's like, we need to bring all these jobs back. couple of problems with that. Number one, the trade deficit in and of itself, depending who you talk to, is not necessarily a problem. Like, we are the wealthiest country in the world. So we have we have a lot of consumers. We have a lot of people who spend a lot of money. And so we buy a lot of things internationally. Now, the fact that Vietnam is not buying a lot of our stuff is not necessarily because they are screwing us. And I don't think that they necessarily have the capacity to buy that. You know, I heard the analogy of like, is it a problem? Is your grocery store screwing you because you have a trade deficit with your grocery store? Not necessarily, right? Like, Jen and I are the Wall Street skinny. Are they screwing us because I'm going and paying dollars and they're not buying our courses? I don't know. I don't think so. So I think that that's part of the thing. It's like, number one, is it actually a problem? So that depends on if you believe that it is a problem or not. But then the second is, if the goal is from the wanting to, again, and I do think there are some national security things. Like, we saw what happened with COVID when like you couldn't get PPE, right? Like, that was all in China. It was all manufactured. I think there's a very valid reason to like want to bring certain types of manufacturing back to the US. But the other issue is like, okay, so Jen was talking about like, you want to bring manufacturing back. You are going to need to set up the factories. That takes time to do. By the way, to build the factories, you need to get the parts to actually build the factories. That takes time as well. And then you need the workers. And we have pretty low unemployment. We, again, are stopping immigration, which, again, I think the illegal aspect is a good thing, right? But like, we're also lowering legal immigration. So do we have the workers who can do it? And also, it's going to obviously push up the prices. And, you know, I just think that like, this is why it goes back to, this is why I think a lot of people who kind of understand how this whole dynamic works are like, there's so many things where if your concern is China, then try to like screw China by, again, having good trading relationships with the people around them. Like, don't put these massive tariffs on Vietnam. So there's so many, I guess, issues where it falls apart. And say to take the medicine, like, this is the thing. It's like, but what is the ultimate goal here? Like, is the goal to bring jobs back? Again, well, a lot of these jobs are going to be more robotics based. And by the way, we have an entire knowledge economy. And Bill Gates just said that he thinks that doctors, lawyers, bankers, like, we're not going to need them in 10 years. So we're bringing all these manufacturing jobs back. I don't know. I'm like, is it jobs? Like, what is it? That's the problem, is like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? Because I just still don't see what the goal is with the way this was implemented. Had it been implemented differently, I could see like very real reason and good reason for doing a lot of this stuff. But I'm still struggling to see what that reason is.
The potentially, I was going to say $1 million question, but probably it's more like $1 billion question, maybe a dollar amount that we haven't created yet, is what does this actually mean for our families? You know, we have all of this high level conversation happening on so many different angles of the story, academic, economic, otherwise. Like, what practically does this mean? You know, you both are navigating your family life. Could you condense that into a couple of bullet points of what do you think we're actually going to see as American families? Jen, you want to start, and then Kristen, you take it from there?
Sure. I mean, well, one of the silver linings, I suppose, is I am having conversations with my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old about how interest rates work, about the different kind of investments in debt and equity, truly at the dinner table, that I certainly never expected to be having them until at least for another decade, right? But we're having those conversations now because mommy and daddy are talking about it because it's really on our minds. I definitely will be putting my next redecoration project on hold, so that's like very much like in the near term. But
is that because of higher prices? By the way, like, yeah.
I mean, I built a house during COVID. Like, no, thank you, ma'am. Will not be doing this again. Like, I don't want to be at the whims of trying to get some goods or raw materials from another country. Like, we're not doing this. I've learned my lesson. But I do think that when I joke about talking to my kids about this at the table, I think that one of the things that produces so much uncertainty and volatility in the markets is a lack of fundamental understanding, right? And so I do think that educational piece, again, understanding these mechanics, right? I have been forwarded 25 different reels from varying influencers talking about what's really going on and what the conspiracy is. And that's a lot of clickbait, but given the fundamental math that we just walked through, I would challenge any one of those people to put those numbers in that same equation and come to that same conclusion without additional information, which I just may not be privy to. And again, I'm totally fine with there's a giant puppet master who's pulling all the strings and this is really the grand scheme and everything's going to be great and you're just a little peon. Like, I am fine accepting my role in that. But what I can't accept is that things are going to happen in the economy or in the broader political sphere or within, the local community that I'm in, and me not understand the mechanics. So I think that hopefully a big conversation like this, and this is always thematic, whether it be with elections, whether it be with changing policies, like the real pressure for the average person to educate themselves and to have trusted sources to go to and to have these conversations with their friends and talk about money and say, maybe I don't understand this, or like, how do you think this is working, or whatever. I hope that that's becoming part of the broader discourse for a lot of your listeners and our followers, to feel really comfortable having these conversations and talking it through, because the more people understand how things work, the hopefully more reasonable the reaction is of the public trading markets, and hopefully better position you are in your personal finances to protect your family, right? I was just taking care of myself when Lehman went under. I didn't have little kids. So like, as scary as it was just me, right? I was going to figure it out. I was going to go, flit off to, I was going to become a chef, right? Like, I had all kinds of dreams. It was just me that I was responsible for. When it's my kids, I sure as heck better understand what's going on so that I can position ourselves and our hedges and our portfolios and how we're invested and how we're speaking and behaving to make sure that I'm protecting them. So I don't know. Education is really at the core of all of it all for me.
Yeah, totally. It's a really, really important point. Kristen, what do you think for consumers out there? What do you think we're going to experience? What are you anticipating?
So much depends on what happens in the next couple of weeks to months. Like, do these things go through? Obviously, like higher prices, Jen and I had to buy a computer, so we just bought it. I'm having my fourth kid. I had to buy, a car seat. I had to buy another bassinet. My brother freaking flew off to Scotland, took my stuff with him. So I'm now stuck buying a whole bunch of new stuff when I don't want to. I bought everything over the weekend. Just personally, like, I went ahead and made some big purchases that I had been holding off on because I was like, I don't know what's happening. There's uncertainty on that aspect. And look, I think that if we do head into a recession, it does make things scary. Like, do you / your partner lose your job? Like, can you find a new job? I don't know. My husband works in finance. I was sort of making that snarky comment. We put up a reel. I was like, now all these bankers, whoever, can go like work in the mines. Like, again, I think manufacturing is great and there's a lot of great things about it. I also don't know how many people who have different skill sets necessarily are going to be pursuing that. The same way when you had coal miners who lost their jobs, they weren't just like, okay, cool, now I'm going to go be a coder, right? Like, switching industries, switching your type of job is not so easy. So again, I think that the actual impact really kind of varies depending on what is your unique situation. To Jen's point, do you have kids? Are you at risk of losing your job? And, I think that, again, for a lot of people, it can be very scary. I would also add, I think that one of the one lesson that I learned is never check your investments. Like, I just don't look at it. So I am not, like, my 401k, I'm not looking. Like, it is what it is. I allocated for long-term investments, like, not checking. But yeah, I think that, again, it's just, it really varies depending on how people are situated, their specific circumstances, and, so much more.
It's so great to have you both. Thank you so much. Congratulations with all the success with Wall Street Skinny. And I hope this is the beginning of many more conversations. I have a feeling we'll have plenty of material. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us on. This was amazing.